We are joined right now by Courtroom Insider's trial producer, Grace Wong, who was formerly Court TV's senior director of courtroom coverage and field operations. Someone who I knew as the judge whisperer for rightful reason, because Grace is the one who would go into the trials and really get the inside story on some of the most gripping cases in American history, dating all the way back. Grace, when did you start becoming the judge whisperer?
Gosh, my career started at Court TV in the early 90s. That's how far back I go. And I was there for decades. And then Court TV kind of went away and it got reinvented as True TV. And so, that very iconic brand kind of was mothballed for a little while. And it was back in 2018. It was relaunched in 2018 and they asked me to come back to it. And I was there till this year. And now I'm an independent trial producer and I happen to be working for Courtroom Insider on the Clancy case.
And that's especially what we're interested in talking about today. Just kind of what it's been like inside the courtroom. Autumn, I know you had some questions you wanted to ask specifically.
Yeah. What has it been like inside the courtroom? Like, how does it feel to be sitting near Lindsay's family and Patrick's family?
Patrick is not there. And I thought maybe his mother would testify because she has been brought up a lot by the defense as someone who was a nurse, just like Lindsay was, and referred her to these mental health providers to help with her anxiety and her postpartum depression. I have to say that this case, more so than any other, has been really just very sad. I mean, there are just no winners here. Even if she is acquitted, even if I hate to say wins because it's not a win. It's even if she is acquitted by reason of insanity. It's clear that she has now been stabilized and feels the loss of her children. I mean, her emotion in the courtroom, her breakdown during the autopsy testimony of her children has really been gut-wrenching to see her, sobbing and falling apart and hyperventilating to the point where, the nurses that accompany her to the courtroom had to step in during the last breakdown. And the inescapable feeling in that courtroom is just sadness because you see the faces of her family. You see her in a wheelchair. She's permanently paralyzed. I know the state's position is that her suicide attempt may not have been so serious because she was unsuccessful. But frankly, you can attempt suicide and still be unsuccessful, but intend to kill yourself or intend to take your own life. And in this case, I think we've had testimony now that these injuries that she suffered are consistent with a serious attempt to take her own life. And, there are lawsuits now, blaming her health providers or her mental health providers for misdiagnosing, allegedly, for not having given her or having over-medicated her. I mean, that's the allegation. So it really is just an overwhelming feeling of sadness and loss. And, the prosecutor did a really good job of making sure that these jurors know who these children are. They've been presented with video and pictures, lots and lots of video of these children happy and healthy and playful and joyful. And the family on outings, just enjoying that dynamic, when you're around a bunch of little kids and all they want to do is play and enjoy life. And I think people with children really, really can connect with that. And even, someone like me who I haven't been blessed with children can connect with it. But having seen that and realizing the profoundness and I
can't even imagine.
I can't. Me and Autumn, we were granted access to go to the courtroom, but we couldn't. We didn't have the means to get there for it. But we kept saying, I don't know if we can sit there impartially for this case, just because of how incredibly sad it is and how connected we felt to the story, having researched it for so long. And one thing that really, I almost felt blessed I didn't hear was the 911 call specifically. And I just, what was kind of going on when that happened? And I know you weren't able to broadcast it, but how painful was that moment for you?
Well, it's quite a few minutes, actually, of absolute horror because Patrick Clancy is on the phone with 911 having no idea of what happened to his children. I mean, he goes into the house, notices that it's silent, and then sees his wife, or goes upstairs, finds his wife on the ground outside. So he goes to her first. And then, once he's on the phone with 911 calling for help. And once they arrive, he tells them, I got to go check on my kids. I got to check on my children. So he goes to the basement where they are, where their bodies are. And so you hear him make this horrible discovery in real time. And he just shrieks. He shrieks with each discovery because, when you come down the stairs, he sees the bodies of two of his children, and he's just yelling in agony. It's just anguished cries of a father who sees his children helpless, unresponsive, with exercise bands wrapped around their necks. And the first thing he does is he tries to remove them, thinking that I guess might help. And it's clear that he has no idea what's going on because all you hear is shrieking. And on the other side of the phone is the 911 operator, and he is not verbalizing what he's finding. He's just shrieking. And so they're saying, what is he screaming about? And then he yells to, I guess, his shrieks are being heard by the law enforcement people that are now mingling in the house. And so they come downstairs and he yells out, she killed the children. And you hear that on the phone.
Did it sound like maybe he dropped the phone at that point and was just screaming in the background, kind of?
Or it was within earshot. The phone was within earshot of his discovery, because it just sounded like with each shriek, he was discovering the body, or each and every body as he's going through the house or the basement, finding his children, with their life squeezed out of them. I mean, this is, I know that social media has been rife with conspiracy theories that he had something to do with it. And yes, he did leave Lindsay alone, but there were no instructions to him not to leave her alone. And there were times, in the months preceding the murders, where she did encourage him to leave the house. I mean, he worked from home. And, the testimony has been he was a dedicated father and husband. He worked from home. He would check on Lindsay, and he was very concerned. He accompanied Lindsay to some of her appointments. And he was just as desperate for an answer and a solution and some cure as she was. I mean, she knew she wasn't well, and she was not getting better, and she was just getting medicine that was not helping her. And, they said, well, she was this, there was no reason to believe that she was not a reliable reporter and that she had sophisticated knowledge of the medication. But she's in the throes of what sounds like a mental illness, right? I mean, she's complaining after, at each visit, I'm having suicidal ideation. I'm thinking of harming myself, and I don't care. I don't care if I'm here. I mean, that at the very least raises red flags that she is not mentally well. And you hear that consistently. Each and every witness has talked about her sounding and behaving normally, right? She's taking her kids to the doctor. She's playing with her kids. She's making dinner or whatever she's doing. These are all normal activities, and they're having normal conversations with her because her thought process is linear. And apparently, if you are exhibiting signs of psychosis, your thought process is disorganized. You don't make any sense. But the witnesses have said she's normal, she's talking normally, she's acting rationally. There's no evidence of irrational behavior. But at the same time, she is seeking help. She's checking herself into the ER. She's going to these appointments. She knows she's not well. So I think, I'm not a mental health expert, but part of this is when you're describing these symptoms, they've got a checklist, right? Where, they're checking these things off. And in her case, there weren't enough items that were checked off to really, alarm these mental health providers. And I don't know if that's the fault of the mental health providers or her concealing and not taking her meds. That part of it, as somebody that has watched it up until now, still, has me wondering what the hell happened. Where she fell to the throes of this psychosis. If it was psychosis, I mean, the prosecution's saying that she's of right mind, but you would have to believe. The problem is that she was a loving mother and nurturing mother right up until that day. Yeah. I mean, that day, she's playing with her kids and building a snowman.
I know. And then that's being turned against her, which is what, Autumn and I keep digging into is that's what happens with postpartum psychosis. It waxes and wanes. So it's very easy for you to seem like it's all together while underneath you're crumbling. I mean, also people were blaming Patrick, people blaming why wasn't her family there, but her family was there. I know her mother testified today. Paula Musgrove, I believe is her name. She was staying with Lindsay, helping her through this on and off through this whole battle. And then even Patrick's mom, Susan Clancy, was very involved. So like, it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like people like blame Patrick, but this was a whole family that knew this was a serious situation. And yet we're still here reporting on this tragedy. It's really, like you said, sad. That's what I feel like.
Very sad.
I mean, okay, let's say she does get acquitted, right? I mean, she's going to go to a mental health facility. She's never going to walk again. She's going to need medical help for the rest of her life. And this kind of paralysis, from what I understand, can shorten your life. So she's lost everything. I mean, she had a wonderful life. She had a career. She had a nice house in the burbs, and she had 3 healthy, beautiful children. And now she's lost it all. Her husband has moved on. Her children are dead. But her family, I mean, she has her family and they still stand by her. And I'm sure they wouldn't have it any other way.
It seems to me that social media doesn't understand that as well. Speaking to that, if she is found not guilty by reason of insanity, she would go to a mental health institution. Well, it's still like a prison, but she's going to get the mental health that she needs. Like some people I feel are confused about that. They're thinking, oh, she's just going to go to this place like a rehab and get some therapy, and then she's going to be set free. I remember somebody commented, I saw, she can get out in 18 months. I'm like, no, it's not how it works. I think that people aren't understanding, like you said, there's absolutely no winners in this trial. There's either way, any way it goes, whether she's found criminally responsible or not, doesn't matter.
I mean, I think the only way, I don't know, Grace, maybe you have a better thought, but I think, I know today in court, they asked if, Reddington asked if they could reduce it to a second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder with malice. But, I mean, either way, if she's found not guilty or not criminally responsible, do you know how long, would it be up to the judge to decide how long she actually has to remain in a facility?
Well, if she's convicted of first-degree murder, she doesn't get out, right? She goes to prison. And if she is acquitted by reason of insanity, then she would go to a hospital where she is now, actually. And I don't know if she would go back there, but she would she would be confined to a mental health facility. And then up until a doctor or a team of doctors determines that she is no longer a threat to herself or to anyone else, then they have to get before a judge and they have to make their case, and then the judge has to decide. I mean, in the couple of cases that Court TV's covered, Andrea Yates, Deanna Laney. Deanna Laney is a similar case in that her defense was also postpartum psychosis, and she killed 2 of her sons and severely injured a third, who was a toddler, 14 months, and I think he has permanent brain damage because she was under the throes of psychosis where she felt like God had ordered her to kill her children. And so, she was very methodical. She went to the yard and there was time for this, and she, took a slab and beat their heads in, killing 2 of them and severely injuring the third. Now, she spent 8 years in the hospital before she was released. And then Barrasone, which is another case that Court TV covered, where he was an Olympic equestrian at one point, but that was an attempted murder. He was charged with couple of counts of attempted murder. He was confined to a mental health facility for less than 2 years before he was released. And Andrea Yates is still in a facility, and she like Lindsay, murdered all her children, and now I don't know whether that's by choice or that they still feel that she is a threat to herself.
Yeah, that's actually what our most recent episode is coming out this week is about. But she's electing to stay there.
Because the same with Lindsay, she's lost everything,
But I think I can understand why, right? Because you are living with the memory of your children who you've murdered. And that memory is going to live with her. And I don't know how you, as a mother who gave birth to these children and loved them for as long as they lived up until she, killed them. She loved them. And I mean, there's no doubt in my mind she loved them because every witness has said she is a loving, nurturing mother. And now she has to live with that memory. And we can see clearly.
I was going to say, because you've seen so many cases. We see a lot of, defendants who show literally like no emotion whatsoever. And I know I'm not a huge body language expert fan, but what you're seeing that, does it seem authentic to you what her emotions are in that courtroom?
Yes, it does seem authentic. I mean, people want to know, are there real tears coming down? If you look at her history, she has no criminal history, right? She's not someone, in some of these insanity cases that we've covered, the threshold or the bar is that they have to know right from wrong. And if they can't appreciate the wrongfulness of their actions, then they do have a case for insanity. And we've seen that. Sidney Powell also had an insanity defense. And what happened there was they argued she knew right from wrong because she covered up the crime. And so she could appreciate that what she did was wrong because she tried to cover it up. Whereas here, Lindsay tried to take her own life. She didn't stage the crime scene. She didn't say, some other dude did it. She took her own life after taking the lives of her children. So that element that we've seen in other insanity cases is not here, which makes it a little trickier, I guess, if you're a juror. And I think this is going to be a very difficult case for jurors to decide. I don't know. I mean, you can never tell what a jury's going to do. I mean, frankly, I'd be surprised if they came back in an hour and said, guilty or not guilty. Usually a fast verdict, favors the prosecution, but I really don't know in this case.
Speaking of the jury, how are you seeing any reactions from any of them to any of the testimony?
I think the 911 call was really, really tough. And I didn't personally see it, but some of my colleagues who had a better view of the front row said that some of the jurors were crying. And in fact, some of the, there was a reporter who's, spent many years in the courtroom said, that she never cried, but this time she cried. And it was really, really tough to get through that 911 call. Because, like I said, it was so anguished and so agonizing to hear him discover, that the bodies of his children, all three of them. You couldn't help but, feel. And, this was another time I think she fell apart.
I know I can't help but think about some of these people that are responding to our posts or responding to other people's posts that are just so mean about the fact that we know that Patrick did this, but they haven't heard that call.
Very adamant. They are adamant that he was the one that did this.
Conspiracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they're basing that opinion on any kind of evidence. If
they're literally, people are sending us like that he was wearing different shoes in different of the surveillance videos, different shoes, different person. I'm just like, to the depths that people are going to create this like alternative story. It's sad because I think it's covering up the truth, which is this woman was in a crisis and she wasn't able to be helped. And why? Why did it come to this?
Why does it keep happening?
Why does it keep happening? Yeah.
25 years ago with Andrea Yates, and how many times since? How many times before? Like, I'll sit here and talk for an hour about it.
It really isn't fair to blame Patrick or to suggest that he had anything to do with the murders of his children. It really isn't fair because that is, it really is taking away from his own grief at losing his children. If anybody has suffered the loss, it's certainly Patrick as the father. And by all the evidence suggests he was a good father. I mean, you see him in these outings, in these family outings. I mean, they don't know that they're being filmed, right? You're watching surveillance video from the Science Museum and from some, family outing.
Right. And not to mention, like, 3 kids is a lot in this day and age. And I have 2. So 3 kids, I can't imagine how much work that is, not to mention your wife's sick and you're worried about keeping your job and trying to take care of your family. And then you go through all this trial and this is how like you are made to feel like you did something terribly wrong and are guilty of their deaths. directly. Like, I don't know. I think this is the one thing that hurts, how we want people to be open and show the justice system. But when the internet does things like this, I think it really hurts what we're trying to do here, which is create, a fair trial for a person and respect the victims, because he's a victim.
And he is a victim, right? He's the father of these children, and I think that, like you said, it must hurt. He's moved on. He's remarried, and he has a new life in a different city. And I think good for him, that he's been able to move past this and forgive Lindsay, which was, I'm sure, really hard.
Yeah. Do you have anything in particular that you know of or that you're thinking that may happen now that the defense is putting on their case?
I am pretty familiar with Kevin Reddington. Court TV is anyway. We've covered one of his earlier cases. We covered a very recent one, Dr. Ingolf Turk. And in that case, Dr. Turk was this former athlete, and he was quite very well built and tall and very strong. And he strangled his wife to death. And I thought the evidence was overwhelming. And Kevin is not afraid to go where other attorneys might not go. In that case, he argued self-defense. And he wasn't afraid to basically disparage the victim. And he did that by suggesting she was a gold digger. And that's something that, defense attorneys sometimes don't want to go there, right? Because that is the victim. But his defense, he won. I mean, Dr. Turk wasn't acquitted, but he won a manslaughter case. He won a manslaughter verdict in that case when I thought that, it seemed like the evidence was overwhelming for murder. And so I wouldn't underestimate him, because he is a very experienced attorney and he's been very successful, and he's won in a lot of courtrooms. And I think that he's gotten a lot of very good results for his clients, many, many clients. And in this case, what is the question that nags me is whether he would put Lindsay on the stand. And at first I thought, he just might, because if you have, experts on one side that say one thing, and then on the other side, you get experts that disagree, then the deal breaker would be Lindsay, right? She's the one that can say what's going on in her head. But I thought about what it would be like on cross-examination for her. And if I were the prosecutor, I would ask, why did you separate the children, right? How much time did you spend killing each child? And when did you realize they were dead? Those are questions that would elicit absolutely devastating testimony. Unless, of course, she doesn't remember. But that kind of focus on the actual murders itself and how she did it, getting the exercise bands, tying them around their necks. These are children. Don't forget, they're helpless. That takes, real effort. And so I think that he would want to protect her and not call her.
Do you think he'll recall Patrick to the stand?
I think I can't remember if he left that option. I always thought that he would recall him, but there is nothing really to rebut.
That's what I was wondering.
Right? I mean, he's basically repeated all the testimony. It's the same kind of testimony that we've heard from all these people that have testified, except that, he was there when she voluntarily committed herself and basically has been clueless about how this happened. Exactly, right? He left the house thinking everything's normal, and he testified that she was having one of her better days on that day.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you all night. What do you think, Autumn? Anything, last thoughts?
No, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
You gave us even more than I could have dreamed you would. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're amazing.
You are.
Thanks.